air was thick with dust and the sharp scent of shattered glass, the remnants of the orphanage's once pristine halls scattered like fragile memories beneath Elara's feet. She stood motionless, her slender frame silhouetted against the fractured light filtering through the broken windows. Lumen, the heart-bearing child, moved silently among the ruins, the faint glow beneath their translucent ribs pulsing softly like a beacon against the encroaching darkness. Their delicate fingers reached out with deliberate gentleness, touching the other children, some cracked, some fractured, all still shimmering with the eerie beauty that had first drawn Elara to this place. The children's translucent bodies caught the scattered light, casting prisms of color that danced like ghosts amidst the debris. Despite the destruction, a fragile vitality lingered, a testament to resilience where there had been only vulnerability. Elara's reflective eyes, sharp and clear, mirrored this delicate balance. She felt the weight of everything lost, and yet the faint stirrings of something new, a fragile hope that blossomed amidst ruin. Near the far corner, Myra knelt beside a child whose arm had splintered in the chaos. Her soft hands moved with practiced care, whispering soothing words that wove warmth into the cold sterility that had once defined these halls. Myra's presence was a balm, her nurturing spirit steady and unwavering. The quiet murmur of her voice, the gentle touch, offered a contrast to the coldness that had permeated the orphanage's soul. Elara watched her, grateful for the steadfast anchor Myra provided. Jax, disheveled and restless, prowled the peripheral shadows with an intensity born of recent struggles. His quick, darting eyes scanned the damaged security monitors and broken locks, every flicker of emergency light revealing the wear of countless sleepless nights. Yet beneath the exhaustion, a fire burned, a determination to protect what remained and to carry the truth beyond these shattered walls. The scars of his rebellion were etched deeply, but so too was his hope for freedom and justice. Elara's gaze returned to Lumen, who paused beside her at a fractured window. The morning sun cast fractured rainbows across their glass faces, a kaleidoscope of color that seemed to breathe life into the desolation. In that silent moment, mother and child, protector and hope, stood united in reverence. The delicate balance between fragility and strength was not a weakness, but a new kind of power, one forged in the fire of loss and tempered by the promise of renewal. "We survive," Elara whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. Together, Lumen's glowing heart pulsed in quiet affirmation, a steady rhythm that echoed through the ruins and into the uncertain future. Around them, the shattered children stirred, their fragile forms reflecting a world forever changed but not yet broken. The orphanage lay broken, its walls scarred and its glass children cracked but alive. From the wreckage, a new dawn beckoned, uncertain, fragile but real. Elara's transformation was complete. No longer the detached caretaker, she was a fierce guardian, a beacon of hope for the vulnerable souls entrusted to her care. As the light shifted and the shadows receded, Elara felt the weight of her new responsibility settle firmly on her shoulders. The threat of shattering still lingered, but so too did the fragile strength of resilience. The future was uncharted, a delicate thread woven between loss and hope. And for the first time in a long while, Elara dared to believe in the possibility of healing. Outside the broken windows, the world waited, cold, indifferent, yet filled with the faintest shimmer of promise. The glass children, with their fragile bodies and beating hearts, stood at the cusp of a fragile tomorrow. And Elara, their unwavering guardian, was ready to face whatever came next. But the question remained, heavy and unspoken. How long could fragile hope endure in a world that threatened to shatter it at every turn? The answer lay in the days ahead, in the strength found within brokenness, and in the luminous heart that beat beneath the glass. And so, beneath the fractured light, the story continued, fragile, haunting, and filled with desperate hope. The early light of dawn crept slowly across the shattered remnants of the orphanage, casting fractured beams through the cracked window panes. Elara stood motionless beside the broken glass, her sharp, reflective eyes tracing the delicate silhouettes of the surviving children as they huddled quietly in the courtyard. The The silence was thick, a fragile veil that seemed to hold both sorrow and promise. The air smelled faintly of cold metal and distant rain, a reminder of the ordeal they had endured. The courtyard was a mosaic of broken shards, glittering under the pale sun like scattered stars fallen to earth. There, amidst the fractured beauty, stood Lumen, the heart child, whose translucent form shimmered faintly with pulses of light. Elara watched the child's slender fingers reach out hesitantly, brushing against the jagged edges of a glass fragment. The faint glow from Lumen's beating heart beneath their ribs cast a gentle warmth that seemed almost impossible against the cold silence surrounding them. It was a moment of tender vulnerability, a reminder that beneath the delicate surface lay a spark of life that refused to be extinguished. Elara's breath caught as she saw the child's gaze lift, meeting hers with a quiet, innocent curiosity. In that glance was the unspoken truth of their shared survival, the fragile hope that had carried them through the night's darkness. The orphanage was broken, scarred by conflict and loss, but these children remained, and in them a new dawn was beginning. Inside the dimly lit common room, Myra and Jax sat close to a flickering terminal, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the screen. Their voices were low but firm as they conferred, weaving cautious plans to rebuild the fragile sanctuary. Myra's nurturing warmth balanced Jax's restless energy. Together, they embodied the resolve to protect the children from the looming threats that still shadowed their fragile existence. "We can't let what happened happen again," Myra whispered, her eyes reflecting a fierce loyalty. Jax nodded, fingers dancing over the keyboard. "We'll need new defenses and a way to keep the outside world at bay. But more than that, we need to keep their spirits alive." Their determination was a quiet rebellion against the cold authority that had sought to control and exploit. Elara knew that the path ahead was fraught with danger, but with allies like Myra and Jax, the fragile hope that flickered within these walls might yet endure. Later, alone in her sparse quarters, Elara stood before a cracked mirror. Her reflection was fractured, lines and fissures running through the glass like the scars on her soul. Yet within those breaks, there was a resilience, a refusal to be undone. She traced the contours of her pale face, the eyes that mirrored the glass children's delicate fragility, and felt the weight of responsibility settle upon her. In the stillness, she reached for a pen and paper, her hands steady despite the turmoil within. She wrote a silent vow, words meant only for herself and the children she had come to cherish. "I will protect you, no matter the cost. In this world of shards and shadows, I will be your guardian. Your fragility will be met with strength, your innocence with fierce love. Together, we will find a way through the darkness." The promise was a seed planted in the fertile soil of loss and hope. As the sun rose higher, casting light into the orphanage's broken halls, Elara turned from the mirror with renewed purpose. The new dawn was fragile, uncertain, but it was theirs to shape. Outside, Lumen's faint heartbeat echoed softly, a rhythm of life that refused to be silenced. And in that steady pulse, Elara found the courage to face whatever trials awaited, knowing that the delicate balance between fragility and strength was not a weakness, but a testament to the enduring spirit within them all. The orphanage, scarred but unbroken, awaited the coming day, a day where innocence could be protected and new beginnings forged amidst the shards of the past. Elara's journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, there was a quiet hope that whispered through the glass walls, promising a future where even the most fragile could shine brilliantly. As she stepped back into the light, Elara's eyes caught Lumen's once more, their glowing heart a beacon in the dawn. The fragile children were no longer just delicate creations. They were survivors, bearers of a fragile tomorrow that she was sworn to protect. And so, with the rising sun casting its fractured light across the world, Elara embraced her new role, not merely as a caretaker, but as a guardian of fragile hope, ready to face the uncertain future with courage born from the shattered past. The story of the glass children was far from finished. It was only just beginning. The caretaker's quarters were nearly silent, save for the subtle hum of ventilation and the faint, occasional creak of the building settling against the night. Elara sat alone on the edge of her narrow cot, eyes locked on the cracked glass figurine resting in her palms. The delicate sculpture, once whole and gleaming, now bore jagged fractures, each shard catching the dim light and splintering it into shards of shadow that danced across the sterile walls. The sight stirred a quiet ache within her, an echo from a past she had long tried to contain. Memories came unbidden, flooding her mind with scenes from a laboratory far removed from this cold orphanage. She was younger then, her hair pulled back tightly, face alight, with the fervor of scientific discovery. The lab was a cacophony of beeping machines and murmured voices, technicians and researchers bustling about like ants driven by purpose. But beneath the surface, tension simmered. Ethics committees clashed with corporate executives, and the line between science and morality blurred dangerously. Elara had watched as her colleagues rationalized experiments that created beings like the glass children, creations designed to be perfect, controllable, and ultimately disposable. Her heart tightened at the memory of the day she walked away. A heated argument, voices raised in frustration and despair, and then silence as she turned her back on the project. She remembered the weight of her decision, the guilt that followed, and the hollow feeling of abandoning something she once believed in. Her departure was not a triumphant escape, but a fracture, a break in her own fragile humanity. Back in the present, the soft knock at her door startled her. Myra entered quietly, her familiar presence a balm against the loneliness that threatened to consume Elara. The assistant caretaker's warm eyes met hers, filled with unspoken understanding. "You've been quiet tonight," Myra said softly, taking the cracked figurine from Elara's hands to examine it. "It reminds me of everything I left behind," Elara admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "The failures, the compromises. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just as fragile as the children I care for." Myra settled beside her, the late afternoon sun spilling through the window and casting long, fragile shadows across the room. "Fragility isn't weakness," she said gently. "It's a part of life, something to be embraced, not feared. You've protected them despite everything. That takes strength." Their conversation drifted to the children playing quietly in the garden, their translucent forms glimmering like shards of light. Elara's mind returned to Lumen, the heart-bearing child who had become the center of her world. The child's silent vitality was a beacon against the darkness of the orphanage's secrets and the cold ambitions of Director Voss. Later, Elara stood before the fractured mirror in the hallway. Her reflection was broken, fragmented across jagged lines, yet within those shards, she saw a fierce determination kindling. The fractured image was a testament to her past and the emotional scars that shaped her, but it was also a symbol of resilience. She was no longer the detached scientist who walked away in fear. Now she was a protector, a guardian willing to confront the shadows that threatened the fragile lives in her care. The echoes of her past would not be silenced, but they would no longer dictate her future. With steady breath, Elara turned away from the mirror and into the dim corridor, ready to face whatever came next. The fragile children depended on her, and she would not let them shatter. As the night deepened, the orphanage held its breath, suspended between fragility and strength, innocence and survival. Elara's journey was far from over, but in embracing her fractured past, she found the courage to protect the fragile tomorrow waiting beyond the glass. The early dawn cast a pale glow through the narrow windows of the orphanage, bathing the sterile halls in a soft, muted light that seemed almost reluctant to disturb the fragile quiet within. Myra moved gently down the corridor, her hands steady though her heart trembled with the weight of responsibility that came with each delicate life she touched. In her arms, one of the glass children rested, a small, translucent figure whose fragile limbs shimmered faintly, catching the light like a prism. Myra's voice was a mere whisper, a soothing murmur that seemed to weave warmth into the cold air. There, she breathed, her breath fogging slightly against the child's fragile surface. "You're safe. We're here." The child's glass form seemed to pulse subtly in response, a soft glow emanating from within like the flicker of a candle struggling against a draft. Myra's eyes softened, reflecting the fragile beauty before her, a living testament to innocence trapped in crystal. The orphanage, once a place of sterile control and clinical detachment, had become a fragile sanctuary where care was measured in the gentlest touch, the quietest word. Meanwhile, beneath the surface of the orphanage, in the labyrinthine network of maintenance tunnels and forgotten conduits, Jax moved with practiced stealth. His quick, darting eyes scanned the dim spaces as his fingers worked deftly to disable surveillance nodes and bypass locked systems. Each lock he picked, each camera he blinded, was a small victory against the oppressive oversight that Director Voss had imposed like a suffocating shroud. Jax's disheveled appearance belied the sharpness of his mind and the depth of his commitment. His rebellious spirit was fueled not by anger alone, but by a fierce desire to reclaim freedom for the children who had become pawns in a cold game of control and exploitation. As he slipped through the shadows, the faint hum of machinery and the distant echoes of footsteps reminded him of the stakes. Failure was not an option. Above, in the orphanage's central hall, Elara stood surrounded by the shards of broken glass and scattered memories. Her pale, slender form was framed by the fractured light filtering through the shattered panes. Her sharp eyes, reflecting the kaleidoscopic patterns cast by Lumen's faintly glowing heart beneath their translucent ribs. The child stood close beside her, their fragile body pulsing with a vitality that defied the cold sterility of their surroundings. Myra approached quietly, her presence a balm to the tension that clung to Elara's shoulders. Jax joined them moments later, silent but resolute, his eyes speaking volumes in the absence of words. Together, they formed a fragile triad of guardianship, each bringing strength born from vulnerability, each committed to protecting the delicate balance of life within these walls. The children gathered nearby, drawn to the warmth of their protectors like moths to a distant flame. Their translucent forms clustered in a trembling circle of light and glass, the reflections they cast shimmering against cracked walls and shattered dreams. Myra's soft lullaby floated through the air, a thread of melody woven from hope and memory, binding the fragile group in a moment of serene unity. Elara felt the weight of their gaze, the quiet trust that these fragile beings placed in her hands. The journey they faced was fraught with peril. Director Voss's agents still lurked beyond the shadows, their cold intent threatening to fracture the sanctuary built from glass and hope. Yet in this fragile moment, surrounded by the silent guardians who stood unwavering, Elara found a sliver of strength she had thought lost. "We are not alone," she whispered, her voice steady despite the tremor beneath. "Together, we will hold them." Myra's gentle smile was a beacon of warmth, and Jax's fierce eyes burned with determination. The fragile children, with their shimmering bodies and beating heart, were the living reflections of resilience amid vulnerability. Their future rested on this fragile alliance, a testament to the power found in unity and quiet courage. As the lullaby faded into silence, the orphanage seemed to pulse with a new rhythm, one forged from the mingling of innocence and defiance, fragility and strength. The shadows might stretch long and cold, but within these walls, the silent guardians stood ready, watchful and unyielding, to protect the fragile light that flickered in the heart of glass. The path ahead was uncertain, and the threat of shattering lingered like a breath on glass. Yet in the shared strength of Myra's nurturing warmth, Jax's rebellious spirit, and Elara's steadfast resolve, a fragile hope blossomed, one that might yet endure the coming storm. And so, as the first rays of sunlight pierced the gray dawn, the orphanage held its breath, waiting for the next move in a game where every shard of glass could mean salvation or destruction. But for now, the children were safe, cradled in the hands of silent guardians who would fight to the last breath to keep their fragile world whole. The lullaby resumed softly, a fragile thread weaving through the cold air, a promise whispered between shadows. No matter what splintered, something beautiful would remain. The sterile silence of the archive room was punctuated only by the soft hum of the holographic interface, its translucent panels pulsing faintly under Elara's fingertips. She sat motionless for long moments, eyes narrowed, reflecting the shards of data dancing before her. Beside her, Jax's disheveled figure leaned in close, eyes darting rapidly as he decrypted layer upon layer of encryption. The truth was buried deep within the orphanage's digital veins, a hidden network of intentions more sinister than even Elara had feared. "Look at this," Jax whispered, voice low but urgent. "They're not just creating these children as experiments or curiosities. They're planning to weaponize them." Elara's breath caught. The files revealed protocols for manipulating the glass children's unique physical properties, fragility twisted into a tool for destruction. The delicate beings, symbols of innocence and vulnerability, were to be transformed into cold instruments of control. The stark contrast between the children's translucent beauty and the clinical coldness of the plans sent a shiver through her. This is monstrous," Elara murmured, fingers trembling as she reached out to touch the glowing data. "We can't let this happen." Jax's eyes met hers, fierce yet laced with exhaustion. "We need proof. We need to expose them." Outside the archive, soft footsteps echoed down the sterile corridors. Myra appeared, her presence a balm amid the tension. Her soft features were etched with concern as she approached the two conspirators. "How are the children?" she asked quietly. Elara glanced toward the observation window where faint silhouettes of the glass children shimmered, their fragile forms casting prismatic reflections onto the cold floors. "They're scared. They don't understand what's coming." Myra nodded, her hands moving instinctively to soothe a trembling figure nearby, a child whose glass limbs flickered with the slightest tremors. The moment was fragile, a tender interlude underscored by the looming threat. "We have to protect them," Myra said softly, "no matter what." Meanwhile, in the upper echelons of the orphanage, Director Voss stood behind a thick pane of reflective glass. His tall, austere figure was fractured by the distorted light, casting shards of shadow across his cold face. The pane mirrored his fractured morality, a man driven by loss and obsession, willing to sacrifice everything for control. His gaze was unyielding, eyes sharp as flint as he watched the unfolding resistance. To him, the children were assets, not lives, tools to be molded and controlled. Back in the archive, Elara's own reflection caught her eye, distorted and fragmented in the cracked glass panel beside her. It mirrored the turmoil within her, the shattering of illusions, the painful acknowledgement of complicity, and the fragile hope that still flickered beneath the surface. "I won't let them destroy what's left of innocence here," she vowed, voice steady despite the weight pressing down on her. Jax placed a hand on her shoulder, a silent promise of solidarity. "Then we fight, together." The room seemed to hold its breath as plans were laid, alliances forged in whispered urgency. Outside, the orphanage's cold walls concealed the brewing storm, a clash between fragile life and merciless ambition. As Elara prepared to face the coming darkness, the motif of reflection echoed in every glance, every shard of glass, a reminder that truth, like glass, could be shattered but also refracted into new light. The battle was no longer just for survival, it was for the very soul of the children and the fragile hope they embodied. The night deepened, shadows lengthening as Elara stood before the cracked glass once more. Her own image fractured but unbroken, she whispered into the silence, "For them, I will be unbreakable." With the dawn still distant, the fragile war for innocence and identity was only just beginning. The infirmary's sterile glow cast long, wavering shadows across the pale forms of the glass children as Elara sat beside Lumen, her fingers tracing the delicate contours of the child's translucent limbs. The faint pulse beneath the delicate ribs was visible, a soft, rhythmic glow that seemed almost impossibly alive within the fragile cage of glass. She held her breath, watching as the tiny heart beat steadily, a beacon of life against the cold sterility of their surroundings. "It's more than just glass," Elara whispered, her voice barely carrying in the stillness. "You're more than what they made you to be." Lumen's eyes, clear and deep, met hers, silent but filled with an innocence that transcended the fragile medium that encased them. For a moment, the orphanage faded away, the harsh walls, the clinical hum, the ever-watchful eyes of security, and all that remained was the fragile beating heart and the quiet connection between caretaker and child. Myra's soft footsteps interrupted the silence as she entered, carrying a small tray of supplies. Her warm smile was a balm to Elara's weariness. "They're all waiting," Myra said gently. "The others, they look to Lumen differently now, like they see something real." Elara nodded, a mixture of hope and dread tightening in her chest. Lumen was no longer just a fragile experiment but a symbol of life, of hope, of resistance against the encroaching darkness Director Voss represented. Later, in a dimly lit room hidden beneath the orphanage's labyrinthine corridors, Elara met with Myra and Jax. The air was thick with quiet urgency, the flickering fluorescent lights casting jittery shadows that danced across their determined faces. "We can't just wait for them to come," Jax said sharply, his eyes bright with rebellious fire. "Lumen's heart, it's a sign. The children are beginning to sense something. We need to prepare." Myra nodded, her voice steady despite the tension. "We'll protect them, whatever it takes." Elara's gaze was fixed on the faint pulse she imagined echoing in her mind, the living heart beneath glass, fragile but persistent. "Then we fight back," she said finally, the weight of her words settling around them like the cold walls they sought to protect. In the central hall, the glass children gathered, their bodies catching the artificial light and fracturing it into shards of color that shimmered like living stained glass. They moved in delicate harmony, their mirrored forms casting fractured reflections that multiplied infinitely across the walls and floor. Lumen reached out, fingertips grazing the faces of the others, sending ripples of prismatic light dancing across the room. The silence was broken not by words, but by a profound, shared understanding, a fragile solidarity forged in the clarity of their translucent forms. Elara watched from the shadows, her heart swelling with a fierce protectiveness. The children were no longer passive objects of an experiment. They were a living testament to hope, to innocence preserved against overwhelming odds. Night deepened, and Elara found herself standing alone before the vast observation window that overlooked the sprawling city beyond. The lights glittered distantly, blurred by the cold glass pane. Her reflection merged with the faint glow of Lumen's heart etched in her memory, a haunting reminder of the delicate balance between fragility and strength. She breathed deeply, feeling the weight of the days past and the uncertain road ahead. "We are fragile," she whispered to the night, "but we are not broken." The orphanage was a fragile sanctuary, a place where glass and heart entwined in a delicate dance. And within that fragile heart lay the promise of something new, a future where innocence could endure, where hope could survive the shadows. As the first light of dawn threatened the darkness, Elara's resolve hardened. The struggle was far from over, but with Lumen's glowing heart to guide them, the children had found a reason to fight back. The glass had a heart, after all, and it beat defiantly against the cold. And so, beneath the fragile surface of glass and shadow, a quiet revolution began.